In the sprawling chaos of Tokyo, where neon lights flicker like whispered secrets, and the city breathes a relentless heartbeat, Kaito Arakawa stood in the shadows of his atelier. A sprawling space filled with half-finished designs, bolts of fabric cascading from tables, and the faint smell of coffee grown cold. It was past midnight, and the silence within the walls of his studio seemed thicker than the air outside. Kaito stared at the mannequin before him, fingers brushing the sharp lines of cobalt silk cascading down its form. He frowned. Something was missing. Something intangible. At 36, Kaito was one of Japan's most sought-after fashion designers. His creations were bold, laced with unspoken emotions, and acclaimed for their haunting beauty. Yet, for all his success, Kaito carried himself like a man who wore his loneliness like a cloak. He lived for his work because it kept him from thinking too deeply about the life outside it, a life he didn't know how to navigate. That was until him. On the racks of models auditioning for his next show, a sea of beautiful but mechanical faces, Haru Takamine emerged like a storm breaking over a calm horizon. Kaito first noticed the man because he wasn't what anyone else would call perfect. Haru didn't fit the mold of the fashion world's robotic standard of beauty. His cheekbones were too sharp, his frame leaned to the point of gauntness, and there was a shadow in his dark eyes, like he carried with him the weight of drowning worlds. The moment Haru stepped onto the runway of Kaito's private casting, wearing a simple black shirt and jeans that clung to his wiry frame, Kaito barely heard the voices around him. There was something in the rawness of the way Haru moved, something electric, like every step he took was fighting against gravity. He walked with defiance, with pain, with a kind of intimacy that reached out and shattered the very air between them. Kaito didn't want to look too closely, but couldn't help it. As Haru turned at the end of the runway, their eyes met, and Kaito was caught. "You! Stay," Kaito said, cutting through the rehearsed applause of his staff. Haru stopped mid-step, his piercing gaze locking with Kaito's. There was no sudden softness, no relieved smile. He tilted his head, furrowing his brow, as if this wasn't the reaction he had expected. "Why?" Haru asked coolly, his voice low, roughened slightly by a Kansai accent wafting through the edges of his words. Most people would have melted under Kaito's steely presence. Not him. It wasn't a question Kaito could answer. Not honestly. "Because you're exactly what I need," came the measured reply. The weeks that followed turned into something strange. Haru wasn't just Kaito's model. He became an obsession, a source of inspiration, and an enigma Kaito couldn't untangle. Haru worked perfectly under the harsh discipline of the atelier. But there was a tension. Always a tension. He moved through fittings and rehearsals like a ghost. His hands slid into the sleeves of intricate designs Kaito created as though they had been made for him and him alone. Still, he never smiled, never broke the mask he wore. Haru existed like some dark god trapped in human form, an exquisite contradiction Kaito couldn't stop chasing. "What are you looking for in me?" Haru asked late one night, his voice hushed over the hum of the sewing machine Kaito worked at in the corner. Kaito glanced up. The room was dim except for the harsh white light spilling from the small desk lamp. Haru was standing by the window, the world outside a wash of rain and distorted neon. "What makes you think I'm looking for anything, Takamine?" Kaito replied from the desk, his tone controlled, though his fingers trembled slightly as he stitched. Haru turned then, stepping forward with the slow intensity of someone stalking prey. "Because I see it in the way you look at me, like I'm a puzzle you can't solve." He exhaled smoke, his dark eyes narrowing. Kaito's lips tightened. He put down the needle and thread, leaning back in his chair as Haru loomed over him. "Maybe I'm not trying to solve you," he countered softly. "Maybe I just see in you what I see in myself." Haru froze. And there it was, the crack in his armor, a flicker that told Kaito he had struck something raw, something buried. "You don't know anything about me?" Haru bit out, anger sharpening his voice. "I know enough," Kaito murmured. "You don't," Haru repeated, voice quieter as he stepped back, retreating to the dark window. "You wouldn't want to if you did." But Kaito did. He wanted everything. The darkness, the mystery, the broken pieces. He wanted Haru, even though every fiber of his being screamed that this was dangerous, that this man carried something inside him that could crush everything. The cracks between them deepened nights later. After the first major rehearsal for Kaito's landmark show, a collection inspired by the theme of loss, the two found themselves alone in the dressing rooms. Haru was pulling off the final piece Kaito had asked him to wear, a high-collared black coat made of delicate jacquard and studded with hand-sewn beads. The garment seemed alive, as though it had been crafted to cloak Haru like shadows themselves. But there was strain in his movements that night, an unraveling. Kaito lingered by the racks, unable to leave. His voice was almost a whisper when he asked, "Why do you push everyone away, Haru? Your talent, your beauty. It burns through the walls you build, but you refuse to let anyone close." He stepped forward, shots of adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Why?" Haru stopped mid-motion, his shirt half off, his shoulders rigid. "Don't ask questions you're not prepared to handle, Arakawa." But Kaito did. He couldn't stop. He moved closer until he was standing behind Haru, the scent of rain on Haru's skin threatening to overpower him. "I want to know! I need to know!" Haru spun around then, hands gripping Kaito's arms. Hard. "You need to stop wanting me," he hissed, voice darker than Kaito had ever heard it. "I'm not your muse. I'm not your salvation." Kaito didn't flinch. If anything, he leaned into the grip, staring directly into those tormented eyes. "What if I don't care?" It was in this moment that Haru, facing the unbearable weight of someone choosing to burn for him, finally shattered. He pulled Kaito in with a desperate force that caught them both off guard. Their lips met, bruising and electric, as if years of pain had built to this single explosion, this exchange of emotions neither could say in words. It was intoxicating, thrilling, and terrifying all at once. Kaito felt himself drowning in it, in Haru. But when the kiss ended, Haru pushed him away, his breath ragged. "This can't happen," he said, his haunted gaze burning with something close to regret. "If you knew the things I've done, if you knew the reasons I'll never deserve anything like..." He stopped himself, biting down on the words. Kaito reached for him. "Then show me," he said. "Let me carry some of that darkness with you." Haru shook his head, stepping into the shadows as though they might swallow him whole. And that night he disappeared. Hours turned into days, days into weeks. Kaito searched for him, threw himself into his work to numb the ache, but it wasn't enough. Haru haunted him, his voice, his touch. It wasn't until the night of the show that Haru returned. Kaito had almost lost hope, but then he saw him. Haru standing in the corner of the runway backstage, clad in Kaito's final design, his face unreadable. The city was ablaze in light, reporters and spectators crowding outside the venue. Kaito had almost lost hope, but then he saw him. Haru, standing in the corner of the runway backstage, clad in Kaito's final design, his face unreadable. "Why?" Kaito whispered as they stood in silence before his greatest masterpiece. Haru's lips curved into something faint, almost bitter. "Because when I wear your designs, I feel like maybe there's a version of me that isn't broken." Kaito stared at him. Haru was pulling off the final piece Kaito had asked him to wear, a high-collared black coat made of delicate jacquard and studded with hand-sewn beads. The garment seemed alive, as though it had been crafted to cloak Haru like shadows themselves. But there was strain in his movements that night, an unraveling. The runway lights flared, and Haru stepped forward, walking into the brilliance as if claiming his place. And Kaito stood in the shadows, watching the man he had fallen for become the heart of his creation. And perhaps the salvation of them both.